Okay, so if I've got a building project, let's talk about residential rather than commercial right now.
Yeah.
Um, are there any rules of thumb for determining how much it might cost?
No, not really, because I mean, lots of people say, lots of builders will say we work on a square footage based price and all the rest of it. Well, fair enough. For certain standard types of build, you can work on a square footage price. In other words, so much per square foot. You will charge so much, so many pounds per square foot. That changes and it varies, and that's really a generalisation of the pricing for your area. Now, obviously, in London, a square footage price, general rule of thumb, a square footage price is higher than it would be, say, in Durham, because labour costs are higher and material costs are higher. So consequently, the same house, if you had two houses that were exactly the same size, same spec, one in London, one in Durham, the one in London is going to cost you far more than the one is in Durham, purely because of location. So generally, no, but usually a builder will be sort of pretty up to speed with his area and the general prices for his area. So could, just as an introductory price, and it should only ever be taken as an introductory price, it should never be taken as a firm price, but it will help you gauge where you need to be. So what you could do is measure up your plans, work out the square footage, and say, I don't know, times that by, if in your area it's, I don't know, £100 a square foot. So whatever the square footage of the building is, times by £100 per square foot will give you a figure that will get you somewhere in the right ballpark. Then of course you get it priced up more accurately once you've got all your accurate drawings, etc., etc., etc.
Yeah. So I mean, so I'm just thinking now. So if you were, if I was building, if I had a new build, I was building a house. It's kind of like at the start, because I also need to kind of be able to say, I've got, just picking a number, 300 grand. It's kind of like knowing, like, who is it that tells me when I'm designing the house how much my 300 grand, how far my 300 grand is going to go, how I know what I'm going to be able to get for that money. That's where this question comes from. Do you see what I'm
Well,
saying?
this is location led. Now, building and designing are two different things. So, if you go to a designer and you ask them, you walk into an architect's office and you say, right, I want some drawings done because I'm building my own house. I have a plot of land and I'm building my own house. The first thing any good architect will ask is, to what budget? What's your budget? You will then tell the architect that I'm design. So I've got a £300,000 budget, and the architect will design accordingly. He won't be accurate, but he will design based on a square footage basis for that area. So
Right.
again, it's location led. So first of all, you'll have the designs. Now, 9 times out of 10, when the architect designs you a place for £300,000 budget, it's never in reality going to come out at £300,000, because architects usually and designers can't help themselves put a little bit in here, a little bit in there, and a little bit in here that they haven't really costed, because they get a bit egotistical when it comes to designs. And I've never met one that hasn't been. Okay, so they will say they're going to design in or around the £300,000 budget, and then probably by the time you go to the builder with the final drawings and get it priced accurately, it's probably going to come out a good 20% dearer.
So in that situation, where it does come out 20% dearer, and you really can't afford 20%, to stretch your budget by 20%.
You go back to your architect
Yeah.
at that point, say, look, I've had three quotes for this, and they're all coming out, 20, 25, 28% dearer than I wanted to spend or than I can spend. I need to alter the drawings. Can you please do that? Or alter the specification?
Yeah.
And the architect should do that for you. So because he'll have a more accurate gauge then as to what the spend is, because they'll see it, what the costings are, because he'll see it then in the breakdown from your builders.
Yeah.
Okay. So you can say, oh, I can see what's costing the money here. The roof, I've given you a slate roof. Actually, we can put a clay roof on this, or an interlocking tile roof, which you'll probably say, yeah, do you know what? I'm absolutely fine with that. There's a couple of houses down the road with clay roofs, and yeah, actually, I quite like that. that would significantly drop the price. So it's all about sort of, the little tweaks after you've had the pricing.
Yeah. Do you ever
Unless
see?
you've got a very good architect who is going to stick true to his word and cost it as he draws.
Yeah.
But I haven't met one yet.
What about? Is there anything you see like when you get plans and you get so people have been to a designer or an architect, they come to you, and is there something that you see regularly where you think this is just the biggest waste of money and is completely unnecessary and could kind of like help the client out, or by literally just removing it or changing materials up or certain anything like that?
Not really, because I mean I've met so many clients now that and everyone's different, and everybody wants all their weird and wonderful, wacky little tweaks and add-ons and extras, and that's up to them. So learning the hard way as I have, my mission is always to try and give the client exactly what they want. Now, there are occasions where I will say, actually, that's not practical, and try and advise against it, or advise that it's going to be a waste of money, or you're going to spend a lot of money for nothing that's probably not going to work. It's not going to be as efficient as you think it's going to be. It's not going to, for whatever reason. And then I'll throw it back to the client and leave it to them, really. And they'll either say, yes, take your advice, or no, we want it no matter what. So irrespective of what I might think, if they want a purple helicopter dangling down from the ceiling of their lounge, at a 1 to 20 scale, no matter what, and they want to use it as a light for the lounge, then that's up to them. Yeah. At the end of the day, I can only advise and say, do you know what? You're probably spending a bit too much on this light. It's going to overtake the lounge. It's going to look silly because it's not going to match the rest of your surroundings in the lounge, blah, blah, blah. At the end of the day, if they say, well, do you know what? I really like it, so I want to keep it. Hands up, you keep it.
Yeah. And what about cost overruns? Is there kind of like one or a couple of main causes, like all of the time?
Yeah.
Where projects run over? Is there? Can you drill it down to like, these two things are always like usually the cause of cost overruns in a project?
Right. Well, listen, I've said this before. The problem, the most important thing. Remember, I keep using that. It's a phrase. It's an overused phrase. Failing to prepare is preparing to fail. So it's really, really important that you get all your costings done as accurately as you possibly can. In other words, that means cost in before you build this and it's very important. Cost in things like the door handles, even the little escutcheons where the key goes in. Things that you think are just irrelevant, cost them in. Cost in absolutely everything, so you know where you're going for a start. So one of your big overrun problems is when you don't cost it all in, and you have lots of unexpected costs that are essential but unexpected. That's one of the biggest problems. The second biggest problem is bad management of your finances, allowing the builders to overrun in various different ways, allowing the builders to charge you extras when they shouldn't really be extras. So a lot of it is down to management. And another thing is, as problems arise through the build, if they do arise, but as and when they do arise, it's about the quality of the management you apply to those problems. So in other words, it's about mitigating any problems that arise from a cost perspective. That is really, really important. Now that can be done with good management. So you're on site, all of a sudden, your footings have got to be deeper than you think they're going to be because, I don't know, the ground's softer and it's caving in. You've had a heavy rainfall overnight, your ground's caving in again. It's at that point you need to talk to your builder, talk to your architect, start managing the fact that you're going to have a wider trench, which is going to need more concrete. You're having more muck away as a result of having to dig it back out again. But the management then comes into play. So you start negotiating with the builder. Okay, it's a bit of an accident. Come on, I shouldn't be charged that much. And all these extra things come into play. And that is really, really important. So that's just one example. But it is very important that you manage the overruns, the overcost. Very, very important. But like I say, the more you've got up front, the more you can deal with up front, the better it's going to be. Even, and I've said this before, even if that means paying your architect, I don't know, £300-500 more to absolutely specify everything that you want in that house, from the colour of the walls to the colour of the light switches. I mean, go to town, because it will cost you far more with the builder if you don't.
Yeah. And then, so that's kind of like a lot of that stuff is kind of like unexpected costs as well. What about if you're halfway through a project and you just want to change the spec? You think, actually, I fancy this more advanced material on the roof or as a cladding.
Right.
Is that sort of thing? As long is that easy, an easy change to make?
Yeah, well, it is. But look, any cladding, any changes rather to the exterior, I've normally got to go back to planning before you can get permission to make changes to the outside. In the old days, you could make changes in what were called overlays. You used to submit an overlay, and as long as it complied with planning legislation, they would just give you in 2 weeks and say, yes, we're okay with this, carry on. Now, if you make changes that are material, then they will, so a material change that is, they will say it's got to go back through planning. So you need to be careful of that one. But having said that, again, it's down to management, because management, if you've got a good builder in and a good architect in, you want to make changes. The first thing you do is go to your architect and tell him you want to make changes. But that is going to cost you money. The minute he starts making changes, he's going to charge you. There is another way. You can just do it straight with the builder. But if you make changes, a good builder should have a VO system. So VO system is short for a variation order system. So what will happen is you tell him what changes you would like to make, whether they be for more money or for less. Okay. He then writes to you on a variation order, okay, on a form that's called a variation order, and he should itemize all of your changes and also put a cost next, plus or minus cost, next to each of those changes. Send it to you, and this work must be done, this procedure must be carried out before you agree to carry out any works. Okay, even if it means a slight delay to the project, it must be done before you agree. So what happens is then your builder sends you this variation order with the prices on. So you now know at this point exactly how much extra or less these changes that you're proposing are going to cost you or not. And then you should sign that variation order off and say, yes, okay to proceed. That way you have managed those changes properly, because you've discussed the changes with your builder or your architect or both. You've managed them by making sure that the builder or the architect issues you with a variation order, and you've then signed it and sent it back so that everybody is aware of what the changes are and what the costs will be. So again, it's down to management.
Okay. And then, so you mentioned delays, like delays to the project. I'm assuming that pretty much any delay to the project is going to incur an extra cost. Is that right?
Not necessarily. Delays to projects. If you're borrowing money, then of course you're going to incur extra costs, because there are charges and interest rates that are going to keep accruing, and you're having delays. So you don't want to do that. I mean, the bottom line is, if you're borrowing money to build an extension, build a house, build a garden wall, if you're borrowing money, the quicker you get it done, the less money it's going to cost you in fees and costs and charges, bank fees, bank costs, bank charges, basically. Okay, so fundamentally, you have got to make sure that you're getting it done as quickly as possible. So yes, there are costs with delays there. If you don't have to borrow and there are delays, sometimes the delays can be beneficial to you, but there are so many reasons for so many delays, you sort of just have to tackle them as they arrive.
Is there a top,
or even as they arise?
Is there a top reason for a delay? Like, is there something that just keeps cropping up all the time?
Weather in this country, weather is the biggest reason for a delay, and it's usually wet weather. So we all know how it rains here. Sometimes it can be prolific, sometimes it can't. But either way, the rain is a big factor, because not only can the rain cause damage, especially when you're in foundation works and groundworks, but it stops bricklayers working. It stops most of the external works going on. So if you're at the stage of your house or your extension where you're relying completely on the external works being built and finished, the rain will affect you. So will adverse cold weather and snow. Heavy winds can affect you. They can stop play. So even in some cases, heat. So yeah, the weather is usually the biggest number one factor that causes delays. The second biggest factor that causes delays is, at the moment, sadly, we have a labour shortage in this country, and getting labour to start when they're supposed to start, or even the right amount of men that you employ to start on the due date, is a problem. So that can cause delays. Thirdly, of course, borrowing money. You run out of money, you're going to cause delays.
How do you pay for a project? So you've got your cash, like from whatever source it's come from. Do you have some kind of like payment schedule, or is that how it normally works? Would you pay all up front, or when it's finished, or how does payment for a project work from the client's point of view?
Well, all builders have their own way of discussing and agreeing payment terms. Okay. Now, it depends on each and everyone's contract. Some builders will rely on a standard construction contract, which is a JCT contract, which comes in various forms, anything from JCT minor works right through to major works, and you get intermediate works and all sorts. So, and they have a structure within them for payment. Okay, so quite often you adhere to those payment schedules that are already embedded in that contract. Other builders don't necessarily use a JCT contract, they use their own contracts, and they will negotiate different payment terms for different types of clients. For example, if you've got a client you think is a little bit, you're a little bit unsure of, and they've told you how they're borrowing money and their drawdowns, and you're thinking, crikey, this could affect my cash flow, then you will tailor your drawdowns to suit their drawdowns. But you'll also tailor it to make sure that you're not going to be out in the cold too long, and it'll affect your cash flow. So, everyone's different, but quite often paying up front, as long as it's a contract, is not such a bad thing, because it will allow you, the client, to negotiate better rates if you're paying up front. So you might get some good discounts. But quite often, and especially these days where it's never been harder for a builder to get borrowing to fund a job, quite often he'll look for the client, or look to the client to fund the job, fund the works. So that will mean that he will tailor those drawdowns so that he is not funding the works and his cash flow is not affected because his money is out for so long. So in other words, he starts on day one, he then invoices 30 days later, and it takes 30 days to pay. So in effect, he's out for 60 days before he gets paid. That will not, very rare that will happen anymore.
Okay.
So it's as it comes on the day. My advice is negotiate your own rates. If you've got a way you want to pay the builder, talk to him, negotiate it. He'll come back with his idea, and hopefully somehow you'll meet in the middle with a nice amicable solution, and you'll be happy ever after.
Yeah.